Hello, everybody, and welcome in to the MVP show for December 6th, 2020. Already December. Can't believe it. I'm alongside Dan Passante and Brennan Miller, and we're here to break down everything in sports heading into NFL Week 13, the playoff push in football. College basketball has started as well. College football should probably already be getting into that bowl setting, but because of the unusual schedule due to COVID-19. Still one more week to go, but that's heating up as well. Boys, I'm glad our show keeps going on, and we have plenty to talk about today.
Yeah, big week NFL wise. I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Not any huge marquee games, but at the same time, as you mentioned, playoff push. Teams are still looking to improve their records. A lot of seeding games. I'm excited.
Yeah, people. I mean, we are here to provide some content. And if you saw our video with Matty Fresh, DJ Matty Fresh, it was so great to have him on. I haven't seen him in a while. And hey, he talks about writing music. Woodstock's right next door to Saugerties. He came here and made some amazing rap music that you all get to see now. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that video is on our YouTube channel, which you can watch after you're done watching this live stream. But where we'll start is a playoff game, or a game that has playoff ramifications today that I think at the beginning of the season, a lot of people wouldn't have thought it would have mattered. That is the first place in the NFC East, New York Giants, taking on the first place in the NFC West, Seattle Seahawks. And Seahawks are minus 11 going into this game. So it's going to be pretty tough for the Giants, obviously, to win with those numbers and how great a team Seattle is. But especially hard because this week, Daniel Jones will not be the quarterback. It will be Colt McCoy. Colt McCoy, you might remember from his days in Texas. I do, when I was 9 years old watching him in the national championship game versus Alabama. But as Brennan puts the horns down to show you where he views. But Colt McCoy has been first off, he was a great quarterback at Texas, but a career backup in the NFL, a career record of 29-27. But what the Giants have to go with in terms of their QB depth and Daniel Jones' unavailability because of his hamstring strain. But and that's obviously what the layout is for today. But how the Giants, in my opinion, manage this Daniel Jones injury will be the deciding factor whether they'll make the playoffs or not. I know they have to win a certain amount of games and obviously finish in first because there isn't a wild card spot coming from that division. It's either you win it outright or you don't make the playoffs due to the historically poor records. So this Daniel Jones injury management, which I think the Giants so far have done well, will be huge. Because you look at the next Giants games and obviously Seattle today, but then you have at Arizona versus Cleveland, at Baltimore versus Dallas. The decision to make sure he doesn't play this week, even though he practiced on Friday and he was at a 75% capacity according to Giants beat writers, it was the right decision. Because you look at the schedule I just laid out, and maybe Brennan or Dan might think Baltimore's a little tougher, but this was easily the hardest game on the Giants' schedule left. So it's the smart move to take out Jones. Now, if he was ready to go 100%, the doctor said so, yeah, put him out. But if there's a slight inclination that he may not be a go, or he's not 100%, or, all right, we could leave him out for 1 week, which I think was the case, they did the right thing. Did Giant fans like it? No, and I'm sure Jones wishes he was in today too, but it was 100% the right decision. And going forward, how they manage it is going to be huge because the Giants, of their next 4 games, not including today, which a win would obviously help, but they need to win, in my opinion, just looking at the division and the other schedules, 3 of the next 4. Baltimore, I think, is the one that is the least attainable to have a victory from. But Arizona's been inconsistent. Cleveland's Cleveland, where they don't score a lot of points. And Dallas is a game that the Giants are going to be favored in Week 17. So, again, this is the hardest game today versus Seattle. It was smart to keep Jones out, but the management is going to be key down the stretch, and they definitely need him for next week. So if this move to take him out today and to leave him out helps the Giants start him and get him prepared for Arizona, I think it was the smart decision. And we'll see as the weeks go on with this injury. But right now, a hamstring strain, and as I mentioned, at a 75% capacity. And we'll break down this game in terms of X's and O's with Colt McCoy. But do you guys want to interject with anything involving the Jones injury?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when you take a look at this game, John, you mentioned the fact that the Giants don't feel too terrible about taking Daniel Jones out of the game and putting McCoy in. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that take a look at the other games that teams are playing in the NFC East. Let's see, the Seahawks against the Giants, NFC East game. The Eagles taking on the Packers, who at this point are looking like one of the best teams in the NFC. Who else? Ravens, Cowboys. Cowboys really don't have a chance against the Ravens. I know it's a 7.5-point spread, but the Ravens have proven that they're a better team than the Cowboys this season and should win. And then the other game is on Monday night, Steelers versus Washington. And Steelers really should have no problem taking care of the Washington football team. So when you take a look at the games that maybe play in the NFC East this week, I really don't think that the Giants are too concerned about any of the other teams in the league or in the division win. So you take a loss this week, and the standings still stay exactly as they are right now. So I don't think that it's too big of a concern.
Yeah, it's a weird season. I remember saying in the beginning, like, the Giants should approach the season like the Bills did. As long as Jones gets better and stays healthy, they should be happy. But they might make the playoffs. So it's a really interesting situation that they're in. And yeah, given the other competition, I definitely don't think it's the worst thing in the world for him to not play today.
Yeah, and it's funny. Brennan mentioned a great point. The funniest thing, right, of the NFC East teams, obviously Giants against Seattle, just to run it back, Eagles, Packers, Washington versus Pittsburgh, and then Baltimore versus Dallas. Guess who's the lowest underdog or has the best odds of winning in terms of Vegas? It's the Washington football team against the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers. That line is only 7, where the Ravens are favorites. Imagine that, right? 7.5 versus the Cowboys are the Ravens. And then, obviously, Giants, Seattle, as we mentioned, 11. And it's an 8-point spread currently. Might have shifted, but an 8-point spread that we have right now with the Packers being favored against the Philadelphia Eagles. So imagine the team playing the team that hasn't lost all season, the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers. That's actually the best odds. That amazes me and shows, again, another, to my point, why leaving out Jones was the smart play today, because the rest of the division, and expected to be the rest of the division, will stay the same, and the Giants will remain in first, even if they get blown out by the Seattle Seahawks. So it's a good point from Brennan. And now, just in terms of X's and O's of this game, because do I think the Giants, as we mentioned, are favorite? No. Do they have a shot at winning? Slight, but I always try and lay out the keys that the Giants have to execute today if they want to win. It starts with their quarterback, Colt McCoy. He's a game manager at best, and he needs to be a game manager that is turnover free. That's going to be the key, keeping the – as Brennan again puts the horns down, he keeps possession. He's a possession quarterback. Yeah. Just tries and, run some play action, get the run game going, and again, not making a key mistake, whether that be an interception or a fumble. And that goes for Jones as well, but especially for Colt McCoy, whose ceiling is lower. In terms of matchup, DK Metcalf versus James Bradberry is going to be fun to watch. DK Metcalf has 5 100-yard games this season. James Bradberry leads the NFL in 15 forced pass incompletions, which I wasn't aware that's a stat, but it is, and it obviously favors Bradberry. So that matchup is going to be huge. No one I can't say stop, because he has had games that have been better than others, but you're not going to completely shut out DK Metcalf. But if James Bradberry and the Giants secondary as a whole can contain him, as well as Tyler Lockett, that will pay dividends for them. In terms of penalties, the Giants are a very good team in not committing penalties, but last week they committed 5. 2 of them, though, late in the fourth quarter, that extended Cincinnati's late drive to get the game within 1 possession, and then the Giants went 3 and out, and then since he got the ball back, and luckily the Giants forced a turnover, but it was 2 penalties, a roughing the passer from Leonard Williams, and a pass interference from the aforementioned James Bradberry, which were just undisciplined penalties, and they need to go, and you could execute those or do those penalties when you're playing a team like Cincy, where you're expected to win, and they shouldn't have been in that game to begin with. But going forward, and especially today versus Seattle, if you commit really dumb penalties late in this game, it's just going to hurt your chances to win. And finally, in terms of the key, and I guess you could say this for every team that plays Seattle, but containing Russell Wilson in terms of just his mobility. The Giants haven't played a lot of mobile quarterbacks. Remember, they only played a half versus Dak Prescott, and Carson Wentz isn't the same Carson Wentz in terms of mobility. So the Giants, in my opinion, really haven't been tested in terms of the mobile quarterback. They will be starting today with Russell Wilson, then Kyler Murray, then Baker Mayfield to an extent, then Lamar Jackson. So it starts today where the Giants linebackers are going to have to keep Russell Wilson up the middle of the field. Honestly, I'll be happy if these Russell rushing yards are up the middle, but if he gets outside the pocket, he could do damage with his arm and with his legs as well. So that will be the keys for the Giants. Again, I told you last week that the Giants should win. Today's a game they should lose, but it shouldn't be a blowout in my opinion. I understand the line is at 11, but the Giants have only played one game this season in which it wasn't determined by one possession, and that dates back all the way to week 4 versus the 49ers, in which they got rolled. But every single game since then, besides their one of their wins versus the Eagles, which was 10 points, they've all been one-possession games. So, I would expect the Giants to keep this close, and that's the expectation. And I understand what's against them, and that's Daniel Jones not starting. But this is a team that's supposed to play other teams closely, and the Giants' defense has been top-notch this season, and that shouldn't change even though the Giants don't have their primary quarterback. Any other notes, boys, before we transition?
I just think it's tough for any team to try and come out and compete with their backup quarterback. I think that's incredibly difficult. Obviously, this game, when you look at the spread, it's not overly far. I mean, it's 11, so a touchdown and a field goal, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't think that's big enough, especially with, I get it. It's still the Giants. Yes, they're in first place in the NFC East. Yes, the Seahawks pass defense is the worst in NFL history, but also they're still throwing with Colt McCoy at quarterback. So I think that's a huge question mark for the Giants. Obviously, Wayne Gallman might see a lot more touches today than he has in the past. This is going to be the last week that he's a starting running back with I forget who their running back was prior. I believe it's Devonta Freeman. Yes.
Yeah, Devonta Freeman. Yep.
I don't know. Who's going to come back next week with from his injury? So I think that Gallman's going to have a big game, but I think it's going to be very difficult for the Giants to be able to move the ball down the field offensively. And then obviously with DK Metcalf on the other side of the ball, and Russell Wilson, who up until about 3 weeks ago was in the MVP, probably first place in the MVP race, throwing the ball to him. I think that's going to be very difficult for them to slow down the ball as well. So I wouldn't doubt the Seahawks being able to run the score up a little bit. And John, I know I'm sorry to say that, but I think that's just how it's going to roll today.
Hopefully not. And again, I laid out the points, but Brennan with good ones as well. And that's one thing with Seattle. They're going to score a lot of points. They do that on every team, but this defense isn't the old Seattle Legion of Boom type defense. Their secondary is one of the worst in football. So, I think the Giants still, even with Colt, might be able to score points. But again, I would say slated to lose, but you want to keep it close, even, not just to cover a number, but for morale going into next week and knowing you have to win a majority of the last 4 games that the Giants have to play. Now a shift to the other New York team in town, and it's the New York Jets, and they're 0-11 today, taking on the Las Vegas Raiders at home. And, am I about to be a little hot takey? Sure. And maybe it's just optimism in me, but I'm going to lay out, just like I did with the Giants, the keys that the Jets need to do in order to win their first game of the season. And I understand the logistics around the Jets not wanting to win this game. You have Trevor Lawrence, who's the slated top pick from Clemson, who you would like as your quarterback next season. The Jaguars still have one win also, so if the Jets were to win a game, they'd be tied with the Jags, and I think the tiebreaker, I'd have to clarify why it is, but the Jags would then elevate to that number 1 pick where the Jets would be 2, and the Jaguars need a quarterback as well. No offense, Gardner Minshew. So I understand the logistics around not winning this game. But the Jets have a good amount of veterans in this locker room, especially Frank Gore. They have a young quarterback in Sam Darnold who, even though the odds are against him in terms of the team he has around him and the coach that he has really not believing in him, he knows that he's playing for his job. And just in terms of this matchup, the last time Sam Darnold threw 300 yards was a game against the Raiders last season. The Raiders are the worst team in terms of, and this is a specific stat, the highest percentage of drives resulting in a score. 50% of the time, which is half, the Raiders defense is out there, they're allowing the offense they're playing to score. Worst in football. The Raiders are coming off 2 losses after, and especially last week, a shellacking against the Atlanta Falcons. And these 2 losses have minimized their playoff potential. And their if they won both, they would be really in the driver's seat to get a wild card spot. Not the case anymore. Las Vegas is traveling to New York, and they were supposed to be on the East Coast, but actually due to COVID protocol, they went back to Vegas just to fly back to the East from Atlanta. It's, I think, a little risky of me to do this and not to spoil anything, but this is the best chance that the Jets have to win a game this season. Again, do they want to? Maybe not. In terms of, the front office. The fans don't. But there is a part in each of these Jets players where they know they lose this game and lose the remaining games of the season. They're going to be a part of history that you don't want to be a part of. Only the 2008 Lions, and I believe it was the 2016 Cleveland Browns, lost every single game of the season. They're going to be remembered for a long time. I remember watching that final Browns game when they were driving and rooting for them just to get that one win, because at that point, even if they did win, they still would have gotten the top pick. But you'll be remembered for a long time. They're still, no matter, even if they win a game, will be the laughing stock of the NFL. But there is a difference between winning one game, which the 1997 Jets did under Rich Kotite, 1-15, and losing all the games and going 0-16. It's something that all these players will have on their records. Maybe a good amount of these Jets won't return, so they maybe not care in terms of the organizational, but you have a lot of rookies that even 2-3 years down the line might still be getting questions, oh, you guys are finally in the playoffs with a 9-7 record. How does this feel coming up in an organization that started 0-16? This will last with them, whoever the players are, for the remainder of their careers and, in terms of these veterans, the latter part of their career, and especially Frank Gore. He'll be 16 losses for him in his what's supposed to be his final season, barring he comes back again somehow. So
he's going to play with his son.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So is there a lot of conviction in terms of X's and O's that the Jets should beat the Raiders? No, I laid out what I have in terms of making that case a little better. But just the sheer need to win, I think, has to get the Jets at least one win this season. I understand they're a terrible team. But going into the season, it's supposed to be a playoff team, but it was supposed to be a team that at least was going in the right direction under Adam Gase with maybe 4 or 5 wins. They haven't done anything really this season. But I think, and especially looking at their schedule, which if you look right now is today versus Las Vegas, at Seattle, at LA versus Cleveland, at New England. This is it. They lose today and they're going 0-16.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Everything you just said is absolutely true.
Thank you.
The Jets players do not want to be remembered for going 0-16. Is this the best game that they have an opportunity to win this year? Absolutely. Are the Raiders a team that is incredibly inconsistent? One week beating the Kansas City Chiefs, but then also losing games that they should have won. Absolutely. Are the Jets probably not as bad as their record indicates? Again, true. Will they win this game? Absolutely not. No. I mean, everything you said is true. 100% true. All those things are correct, but you still have to remember that this is still the New York Jets. And yes, this is the best chance they're going to have to win a game, but they're not going to win it. At this point, they have absolutely given up on the season. I'm surprised Adam Gase hasn't gone out and said, hey, we're not going to try and make the playoffs this year, just like the Chargers head coach. I don't understand why the Jets are so incompetent, and I don't understand why all of a sudden we're having all these teams that are going 0-16. I mean, you mentioned the Browns a few years ago, and then the Lions with Dan Orlovsky at quarterback back in 2008, going 0-16 as well. But prior to that, we had no 0-16 teams. Where is the discrepancy in talent coming from where all of a sudden these teams can go in an extended schedule? Because up until, I forget what year, but the mid-'80s, teams played 14 games, still didn't go 0-14. Why all of a sudden are teams becoming this bad? Because I don't think it's the fact that teams are becoming overly good. The odds would say you're likely to chance yourself into winning one game out of 16. So why all of a sudden have the teams at the bottom of the barrel who continue to get top draft picks, top 10, top 5, number 1 overall draft picks, teams, I mean, you talk about the Jets, they're in a New York market. They have money. They're playing a shared stadium, so they don't have to pay the entire fee that any other team other than the 2 teams in Los Angeles and the Giants would have to pay. I don't understand why this team that is in a huge market doesn't pay as much money as any other team, has draft picks in the top 10, top 5 every single year, why they are not able to get anything going on either side of the ball, really. And how do you go 0-16 in a season where statistically the odds of you going 0-16, even if you are the worst team in the NFL, are pretty close to 0. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it's kind of ridiculous at this point.
You know, I don't even know where to start. It's like, you know, I do agree though that it would follow these players, you know, if they do go 0-16. But I don't know. I don't know if it should. I think it will. But like, I'm just picturing like myself on the sideline asking an NFL player, how does it feel to go 0-16? Yeah, that player should say, shut up. You know, I'm in the NFL. I mean, but I agree that I think there is kind of a legacy thing here. I have learned to expect absolutely nothing from the New York Jets. So if they win today, I'll be surprised. But I mean, I think that it benefits them to lose. So I think that's something to keep in mind with them. But I don't even know what to say about this team because they're really not good at all. And I think that's the bottom line here.
Again, Jets Raiders, it's 1 p.m. on CBS. A couple inactives for the Raiders include their running back Josh Jacobs and their Pro Bowl safety Jonathan Abram, who you might remember a couple years ago from Hard Knocks being the guy who didn't know how to pronounce the word salmon. Thought I'd just throw that in there. But yeah, so the Raiders are without 2 key pieces, one on the offense, one on the defense. Stay tuned. 12:50 on will be our NFL picks, where we will go with this game. It might surprise you, but we will see. And now we'll transition, and it'll stay with New York until we go pretty much national for the last half hour. But there was some baseball news in December before the winter meetings. Some things were reported, and obviously the non-tenure and whether the teams would tenure contract or not tenure contract, that deadline passed. And the Yankees made the decision to offer Gary Sanchez a contract. Obviously, the specifics on it haven't come out yet, and it'll be an extension on his deal. And he wasn't making a lot of money last year. But instead of cutting ties with Sanchez, who's been in the Yankees organization since he was 16 years old, they're deciding to keep him around. Last year in 49 games, 147 average, 253 on base percentage, 618 on base / slugging, 10 home runs, 24 RBIs, 23 hits, and 64 strikeouts. And as Brennan and I know, in that postseason, Kyle Higashioka was the better option behind the plate for the Yankees than Gary Sanchez. And this organization, in terms of Brian Cashman and Hal Steinbrenner, and really Aaron Boone as well, they've not been glowing about Gary Sanchez. Obviously, there's things to fix, but they're not giving up on him yet. They're not riding him like the Yankees fans and some of the beat writers are, and they still believe in his potential. I don't want to say that he's done. It's, again, he's still very young, and the potential and the ceiling is huge for him. Will he ever be a 300 hitter? Absolutely not. But a 245 average and 40 home runs in the modern MLB is huge. And especially in Yankee Stadium, where they're going to, over the years, they just overpower teams with the long ball. Sanchez may be a valuable asset for this team going forward. Right now, it doesn't look great, and especially last season. And I understand it was a 60-game season, a smaller sample size. But even the year before that, not a strong one for Sanchez. I believe he was in the 230 category in terms of batting average. His defense, you could have argued, got better this season, but it's hard to improve from being the worst to being slightly better from last season to the 2020 campaign. I understand, though, the Yankees' positioning in bringing him back. You want to be the team that develops this kid. The Yankees pride themselves on their farm system, on their developmental talent, and a guy who, as I mentioned, has been in the organization since he was 16 years old. The Yankees don't want to admit failure on it. maybe because they believe in something, or maybe they think it's just too early. But nonetheless, Gary Sanchez will be offered a contract. Brennan, your thoughts on this? I especially in the postseason, we were definitely riding Higashioka, but you think this was the right move from the Yankees front office to extend their former All-Star catcher?
Yeah, I think what we have to take into account the fact that at this point, recency bias takes over very hard when you take a look at Gary Sanchez. Yes, he did not have a good season in the 60-game shortened season. He really didn't have a great season prior to that either. He still mashed the ball when he made contact with it. I think he was top 25% in barrel percentage when he hit the ball. He just didn't hit the ball often, and then that's the issue. I think what we're forgetting is the fact that when you look at the Yankees roster, they have two catchers on the 40-man, one of which is Gary Sanchez, of course, the other one, Kyle Higashioka. Yes, Higashioka is a much better defensive catcher. Yes, we've seen him have flashes with the bat. Obviously, that 3-home run game in August is one example that we can point out. But at the same time, consistently, Higashioka is not as good of a hitter as Gary Sanchez is. I think that when you take a look at the ceiling for each one of those players, Sanchez's is 10 times higher. I love Kyle Higashioka, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think he has the capability of being a full-time starting catcher in the major leagues. I think he's a great guy to be a backup. He's the same as Austin Romine was for the Yankees when they had Brian McCann. Same thing, where, yes, this person can be a awesome backup catcher, and it's a position that every MLB team needs, and people get paid millions of dollars to exclusively be the backup catcher. And that's exactly what his role should be on this team. Gary Sanchez is a guy who, as you mentioned, has the capability to be an all-star in the major leagues. Why would you ship him out for no return on investment of a guy that, while, yes, he has had some down seasons as of late, has shown that he has 40, 50 home run potential when he is able to make contact with the ball. Another thing that I think we're forgetting, I mean, these players play in the Dominican Winter League every year. And Gary Sanchez at this point, I think, is batting 250. I looked at it this morning. It's the only reason I know these off the top of my head. 250 with a 6 plus something OPS for an 850 plus OPS OPS. I meant slugging percentage for the last one. OPS. He's hitting the ball really well. 3 RBIs, 3 home runs, 3 solo shots with only 4 strikeouts this year in as many games. Last night he had a 700-foot home run and absolutely crushed the ball. I think that he's going to get back on track. And if you're the Yankees, I don't think you can just get rid of a guy who has been an all-star for you up to this point and in his career is still very, very young. Not just because he has a high ceiling, but also because you don't really have the depth at catcher to be able to do that anyway. I mean, like, you can name Kyle Higashioka, but after that, the Yankees don't have any catchers that are MLB ready. Yes, they could go out and sign somebody. If they could go out and sign James McCann in free agency, then yeah, why would you keep Gary Sanchez? Because McCann has proven to be a better catcher over the last probably 2 seasons. Same thing with JT Realmuto, but I think he's a little out of the Yankees' price range catcher-wise. I think that right now this is the correct move for the Yankees. Absolutely.
Indisputable evidence in terms of the ceiling. I would think Sanchez is higher than Higashioka, but Sanchez, I think, definitely going to have to turn it around because Yankees, as pretty much they are every year, are in win-now mode going into 2021, and their catcher has to produce more. That's no doubt about it. The other side of town in terms of baseball, Mets signed Trevor May. I think this went as an underrated signing, and I understand because Trevor May isn't, I guess as controversial as Gary Sanchez, and again, he's really not a name coming over from Minnesota. But the Mets signed him to a 2-year, $15.5 million deal. May last year, 24 games, 23 1/3 pitched, 3.86 ERA, allowed 20 hits, 5 of those being home runs, 1 no record, 4 games finished, and 2 saves, and a 2.89 ERA over the past 3 seasons. So there's potential there. Again, he's not going to be thrusted into the closer role or maybe even the setup guy. But the Mets, who last year had a bullpen that was just very bad, and their back end of the bullpen has been, terrible for a couple of years now, even though they've, tried to make some high-profile moves with Yaris Familia and Edwin Diaz of recent years. But I think this is a good signing. Again, it adds depth to the bullpen, and if May puts up the numbers that he did in Minnesota, the Mets will take it. May's also a guy that's has come off Tommy John surgery and looks stronger. He had Tommy John in 2018, and last year his fastball velocity, and I know you love this term, his spin rate and his breaking stuff has been up. So, again, you can't have any fault in this signing. And in terms of Mets fans with Steve Cohen, I think they thought that first signing was going to be like, oh my goodness, this huge thing. But you have to fill what the holes are in your team, and the Mets definitely have some holes in their bullpen. And they think they filled that with Trevor May. Brennan and Dan, any opinions on this guy? Again, I want to mention it to give equal time. I don't think to the same level, again, of Sanchez, but it is a 2-year deal for $15 million for the reliever from Minnesota.
I just want to say that I really hope that the reason they signed him is because he saw it on Twitter. Because I've seen that he's going around and asking all the fans, like, who's the best free agent right now? And everyone's like replying to that tweet. So I'm hoping that he was just scrolling through and someone was like, Trevor May. And he was like, yeah, Trevor May. And then he just went out and signed him. I think that's really funny that he does that. And I do think it's cool, too. I don't think he has to, but I don't think it's entertaining. So if the Mets think that's the answer, good for them.
Yeah, I think that the natural progression here for the Mets is sign Trevor May, obviously. Then you go out and sign a little bigger name, probably like a Schwarber or a Brantley. Then probably both DJ LeMahieu and Francisco Lindor.
Oh, no.
Then you trade for Mike Trout, obviously.
Oh, no.
Possibly trade for LeBron James.
Oh, no.
And then maybe flip like Dom Smith and Ahmed Rosario for Jesus himself, possibly. I think that's the correct path that Mets and Mets fans think that they're on. Seriously though, I do actually like this Trevor May signing for the New York Mets. I think that he is going to be a good reliever for them. I think that that obviously, as you mentioned, John, is a place where the Mets are very weak and have been weak for a long time. To be able to get a guy that is a consistent arm out of the pen and be able to trust somebody in the 5th, 6th, 7th innings when you need it, I think is absolutely huge for them. I think that looking forward, free agency wise, we know that the Mets are going to be out there. They're in talks for pretty much every single big name free agent at this point. Same with the Yankees, same with the Dodgers. But I think that they're going to go out and spend money. And I think that this is just maybe the first domino to fall in terms of players that the Mets are going to sign. I said that as a joke in the beginning that they're going to try and, get progressively bigger and bigger names. But I think that's exactly how the offseason is going to work out for them, where they start signing these smaller contract guys. I mean, you mentioned only 2 years, $15 million for May. And then all of a sudden these contracts are just going to continue to get bigger, like we saw non-regular seasons, or off-season. That's the word I was looking for.
Yes.
2 off-seasons ago with Machado and Harper, they waited until pretty much a month before the season started before they signed any contracts. It's going to be the same exact thing this year, where these big-name players, whether it be DJ LeMahieu, whether it be Francisco Lindor, whether it be Carlos Correa, they are going to wait to try and get the biggest possible contracts. And with that being said, all the smaller contracts going to go prior. So this is the first domino to fall for the Mets. And I think free agency is going to be fun once it actually begins in the MLB, because obviously we don't see that rush to sign big-name players like we do in other leagues in the MLB, with a little bit more time taken.
So there you go, baseball analysis. And in terms, again, of this May signing, as Brennan mentioned, hopefully it's the first step to some lofty expectations. Maybe not, LeBron or the Savior, but... But yeah, Brennan with some good points. We'll now shift from.
I heard he's got a hell of a fastball.
What was it?
I heard he's got a hell of a fastball.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. We'll shift from the diamond to the gridiron, and it was a great slate of college football games yesterday. You had number 1 Alabama just throttle LSU, a score of 55-17. A big takeaway from that game was an amazing catch from Devontae Smith, and it stayed in one-hand grab. Future Giant? No. Maybe? No. But yeah, he'll definitely be touted in this draft coming up, just in terms of a pro football landscape, but a great one-handed catch. And if you haven't seen it, wait till our show ends and then go find it on Twitter. Number 2, Notre Dame took on Syracuse, 45-21 victory. Rex Culpepper threw 4 interceptions. Brennan, I'm going to give him a little credit, though, because they were in that game in the first half, and even in the third quarter, it was an interception for Cuse, and down 10, they score right there. It's a one-possession game, but the offense couldn't get out of its way, and eventually the defense just broke because they aren't on the talent level or skill level of Notre Dame, and that's just a fact. They dropped to 1-10 on the season. Again, as you mentioned last week, probably not getting a bowl invite, but you can't be too mad at their effort yesterday. Again, I expected to lose, and they did.
Yeah, you take a look at the Syracuse team. I mean, it was at a point in the first quarter where they scored, took the lead, or maybe it was even the second quarter. But I literally looked at my dad and I was like, there's no way that they actually make this a game, right? But they did for the most part. I mean, you look at how they have played against good teams this year. They played Clemson pretty close up until the end of that game, a game where it looked as though going into it, Syracuse might lose by 70 points. They made it a pretty close game. Same thing here against Notre Dame. I mean, they did the same thing that they have done all season, and that is cause turnovers. Syracuse leads the country with 24 forced turnovers. So I think that is not an issue. I think the defense has been the strong point, or was the strong point with the season ending yesterday for Syracuse, of this Syracuse team. But on the other side, you can't give away 21 turnovers when you're causing 24. It just doesn't work like that. If you're leading the country, number 1 out of 127 teams in turnovers caused, how, when I'm going to pull the numbers, how then do you finish in 124th in turnovers given away? There are 127 teams playing Division I college football, and you're third to last in turnovers given away, first in the country in turnovers accumulated. It makes zero sense. I get it. They played really well yesterday, but at the same time, I think that they had opportunities not just to compete in that game. They had chances to take the lead and possibly win that game against a number 2 team in the country. But of course, playing with Rex Culpepper, who we saw spike the ball on 4th down in the last play of a game against a team they should have beaten. He had 4 picks, I believe, and 2 fumbles. I just doesn't make any sense to me how you can give the ball away that many times when you're also taking it away that many times. That being said, they showed a graphic yesterday of Syracuse. I think they're 4th in the country in the highest number of underclassmen on their roster. So going forward, the team should get much better. Yes, the bar is low. You had 1 win this season. But again, 1 win is the lowest that your bar pretty much can get at this point. I think they have a good quarterback in the future. I forget his name. He started 3 games for Cuse this year, got hurt, didn't start the last 2. He's a freshman, true freshman, going to be able to come in and compete with Tommy DeVito for that starting job, I think. DeVito didn't have a good few games when he was still in, but I think that Syracuse, the only way to go is up. And with the experience they're going to gain with 76% of the roster being underclassmen, with them getting older, I think that the team will get better. And hopefully in 3 years, maybe we have, I don't know, 8 wins, maybe, possibly. I don't know. Throwing it out there.
Some optimism from Brennan, and that's what you get on this show. You look at how bad the Jets are, how good the Cuse are, but we're trying to give you some optimism.
I'm never negative, John. I'm never negative, ever.
Yeah. All right. Number 4, Ohio State routed Michigan State 52-12. They had 23 players without COVID, but still got the job done. The game of the week, Coastal Carolina versus BYU. The Mormons versus the Mullets. That's how it was branded on T-shirts that were sold across this great country. It was a 22-17 win for the Chanticleers on their teal field. Zach Wilson, who's the quarterback of BYU, there's a clip on Twitter of him just getting thrown down by 2 Coastal Carolina defenders. Brandon, could you give some context on that play? I didn't see it live. Was that just a throw down the field, or why were they bullying up on this poor Zach Wilson, who might, by the way, be a NFL quarterback? He's touted as, I think, in that 5 to 10 best quarterback range for the upcoming draft.
Yeah, it was a turnover. Wilson threw an interception deep downfield. The ball turned around and was coming the other way. So yes, technically they were well within their rights to plant him into the ground, but I'd say probably only plant him into the ground the first time, not the 6 times after that they again put his face directly into the teal turf.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, he's a quarterback. He's the face of the team. He's the one that came out and said any team, anytime, wrote it on his headband. Coastal Carolina was obviously the team that stepped up. Not that they really had a choice with their game against Liberty being canceled. But yeah, I get it. Like, he's the guy that you want to be put into the ground if you're Coastal Carolina. But that was just ridiculous, to be honest. It was kind of just insane. Like, yeah, he's the quarterback. He's probably not going to be the one to make a play on this interception return. So you really only need to put one guy there to block him, not 2. And once you put him into the ground, he's probably going to stay there. But yeah, that's the context there. They were within their rights, and that's why you didn't see a flag thrown. But yeah, it probably was a little bit excessive, just a little.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, and it's sad for Coastal that they won't. I guess not sad, but that these Group of 5 teams, even in this odd year, still won't get a playoff chance because Coastal stepped up. I mean, and so did BYU for that extent as well. And anyone, by the way, saying in the college football world, oh, BYU should have went after Washington. Washington didn't show up yesterday. So, I understand in terms of region or COVID, at least, even if you want to make that argument, it would have been safer to stay on the West Coast. But Coastal was the better team. BYU played them, and it ended in dramatic fashion when it was a completion over the middle, but the receiver was taken down at the 2-yard line. So that close to BYU getting a win. Hopefully Coastal gets in the top 10. I think maybe they'll max out at maybe 12 or 11. In a different college football playoff format, which would be nice to see, maybe, where you give, which is just hypothetical in terms of 8 teams, you give the 5 Power 5 conference champions an automatic bid, 2 at-larges, and then you put a group of 5 in there. If that were the case, that would definitely be Coastal Carolina this year. They're still undefeated, getting a win versus BYU. And then in the local game, Penn State bests Rutgers 23-7. They're now 2-5 on the season, 1-0 since we interviewed Maddie Fresh on our programming. So Penn State got the win. Like Syracuse, Brendan, a lot of opportunities yesterday for Rutgers to get in this game, to even win this game. Again, just the offense couldn't get going. Even with good field position at some points, just turned it over too many times. And I think, again, like Hughes, they're taking steps in the right direction, but they're not there yet. And now with that loss, Penn State goes from 5th to 6th in their conference division. So Rutgers, like last year, are last in their division, but at least with some conference wins and not those wins just coming from out-of-conference teams that they pay to play. They've beaten 2 teams that play in the Big Ten. All right, any other notes, college football, in terms of you always have something, Brennan, and Dan, you could add something as well, but I think we covered the bases.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out in that Rutgers game, I have 2 points. 2 points about that Rutgers game. One, Rutgers jerseys were absolutely clean yesterday. They looked very good out in the field against those pretty, classic Penn State. I get it, but the Rutgers jerseys were very nice. Second thing about that game, with their win, Penn State becomes one of 10 teams in the Big Ten with 2 wins. There are 14 teams in the Big Ten, Northwestern, Ohio State, Indiana, Iowa. The only 4 teams that have more than 2 wins. Every other team has 2 wins in that division, which is sad. Yeah. Very sad.
There you go. I disagree with the jerseys, by the way. I understand black jerseys. I do. I like, as even though we bashed them earlier and you had your little rant on them, the Mets black jerseys are their best in those mid-2000s, in the early 2000s years. I love those. The Rutgers are the Scarlet Knights, Brennan. The Scarlet Knights. Not the Black Knights. That's Army. The Scarlet Knights. The Scarlet Knights came out there and had no red in their uniform. What kind of crap is that? I'm sorry. If they were another team like Cincinnati, the Bearcats could get away with that because they're red, white, and black. The Scarlet Knights should not be able to get away with it. I know there's bigger issues in the world, but they shouldn't be able to get away with that. Brennan,
so
Dan, you have a thought on this?
What did you think of the Chanticleers uniforms yesterday?
What were
they? They were all black too.
Okay, great. But guess what? They played, first off, good because they weren't teal on a teal field, so you couldn't see anything. But they're the Chanticleer, so they have a little range. Even the school we go to, Ithaca. I don't like their gray uniforms, but I understand it from a rebranding standpoint because there's a little blue in there, and they're not the blue Bombers or the blue and yellow. They're the Ithaca. So there's a little leeway. Did the Scarlet Knights? I'm sorry, gotta wear red or scarlet.
Nice. They look nice.
Dan, be the decider in this. Did you see the uniforms? You looking them up?
OnTheBanks.com has the black uniforms ranked as the second best Rutgers uniform behind the all-white away uniforms.
Jeez.
I don't know. Right now, well, they have tied for third is the red. This is OnTheBanks.com, folks. I never heard of this place, so I don't even know. But I literally Googled best Rutgers uniform, and that's the first thing that came up. A little ranking right there.
Comment below if you're watching live or watching on the replay what you think of these Rutgers uniforms. Very interested, but Brennan and I are in disagreement. Before we go into our NFL picks, Brennan, do you have your sources contacting you for actives and inactives for this week? We mentioned earlier that the Oakland Raiders and the Jets game, which is in the 1 o'clock window, Raiders will be without Jonathan Abram, will be without Josh Jacobs. In terms of the Giants, Seattle, that's at 4:05 on Fox, so the inactives and actives should probably come a little closer to kickoff. But Brennan, do you have anything? Please tell me DeAndre Swift for the Lions is starting, please.
Unfortunately, that's going to be a no-go for Swift. He's inactive today, along with Salvon Ahmed for the Miami Dolphins, also inactive. DeAndre Washington, another inactive in the early slate this week. Some actives, though, so if you have any of these guys on your fantasy team, this is going to make you happy. Julio Jones will play. Allen Robinson will play. Todd Gurley, Myles Gaskin, David Johnson, Darnell Mooney, all active position-wise. And then you look at quarterbacks and specialists. Tua Tagovailoa will play and will start for the Miami Dolphins. And Matthew Stafford will play and start for the Detroit Lions. So if you have any of them or maybe need to rush to go pick up a quarterback for your fantasy team in the 13 minutes we have before kickoff, those are the guys you're going to want to look at.
All right, so there you go, inactives and actives for NFL Week 13. That segues perfectly into our game picks for this week. We will just give you an update on the standings, and I'm not even slowly, I'm on the rise, as they say. In terms of points, it's Brennan with the lead at 122, Dan at 119, and I'm at 115 after going, I think it was 12-2 last week in my picks. Humble brag. And you look, I have a 7-point difference between Brennan. How many Giants losses? 7. So there you go. That's the difference there. And I pick the Giants every week to spoil at least one pick. In terms of overall record, 104-61 is both Brennan and Dan. I am 97-68 on the season. We give the spreads for full context when picking these games, but we don't pick the games with the spread. We just pick the winner or the loser outright when we're picking these games. We'll start with our game of the week lock and upsets, and we'll go game of the week. There was, I guess, a lot of game of the week options. You have Rams, Cardinals, which means a lot in the NFC West. As we mentioned earlier, 2 division leaders, Giants versus Seahawks at 4 o'clock as well. You have Cowboys, Ravens on Tuesday. Dan's Bills versus the San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football, which is expected to be close. But we're looking at the 1 o'clock window. So, and just as Brennan mentioned, near 10 minutes away, Browns versus Titans as our game of the week. Both teams are vying for a playoff spot. The game is in Tennessee. Tennessee is 5.5-point favorites, and I'm going with the Titans. Look, Cleveland's defense is pretty good. Their offense, on the other hand, not so much. They're a team that is carried by their defense, and in their recent wins, not needing a lot of points to win. But Cleveland's defense, as good as they are, it's hard to stop Derrick Henry. He's similar to when we mentioned Metcalf back in our open. He's a guy you can contain, but you can't fully stop. That's going to be the difference in this one. I think it's one Derrick Henry touchdown is the difference. I had the Tennessee Titans for my game of the week. Brennan, you think different?
I do. I'm going to go with the Browns in this one. I'm actually very excited for this game because, one, it's not going to take that long, strictly because both these teams run the hell out of the ball. I think the Browns at this point run the ball the second most in the NFL, and the Titans run the ball the fourth most in the NFL. So the game, it's going to be a quick one, without a doubt. But I think that the Browns are just going to be able to come away with this one. I don't really have a reason, to be completely honest. It's more of a gut feeling, and you always got to trust your gut. So this is the only game that I am picking by myself, the only one that I am alone on this week, but I am going to stick with the Browns and make it my game of the week pick. I think that Myles Garrett is good, and I think that plays a big factor in stopping the run of the Tennessee Titans.
Which, by the way, people, you don't need a reason to pick a game. I never have a reason. I just go with what I think. And this week, I think the Titans are going to win because a while ago, I thought they had fallen and they couldn't get up. They lost to the Bengals, the Colts. But then last week and the week before, they have wins against the Ravens and the Colts again. They're really inconsistent. So are the Browns. I feel like I should go with the Titans this week, and that's why I take them. 5.5 also. I think that's a big number for this game.
So those are our Game of the Week picks. In terms of what our records are with Game of the Weeks, both Brennan and I are 7-5, while Dan is the inverse, 5-7 on the season. We'll now shift into our locks. And for my lock, I'm with agreement with Brennan in terms of where I'll go with this. And it's a close game in terms of spread, and I understand because the team that I'm picking, which are the New Orleans Saints against the Atlanta Falcons, are coming in without Drew Brees. They're starting Taysom Hill, former BYU standout. I understand that, but I still think even though Atlanta crushed the Las Vegas Raiders last week, the Saints are going to take this game. They're on the road in Atlanta, I understand, but it's a dome. Saints playing the dome too. That's a non-factor without fans. The Saints are going to do enough to win. It will be close. I mean, I think that number is 2.5 or 3 for a reason, but the Saints just have too much firepower, and they want to stay in first. They have something to play for. They want to keep that bye going. Yeah, they lose. They'll still be in good playoff position, but the Bucs are coming close, and it will be a difference for the Saints between a first-round bye and maybe playing as a road team in the wild card, depending on Tampa Bay. So a lot is at stake. The Saints are going to try and continue to keep winning. It's a divisional opponent where I think they elevate their games, and it is my lock of the week. Brennan, you agree with your lock?
Yeah, I think that the Saints are a very good team. I think that the Falcons, although they have been good in the last few weeks, obviously absolutely shellacking the Raiders last week, gives them a hand up here in the competition. But, I mean, they still started 0-5, so they're not that good of a team. I think that the Saints, I talked about it in the podcast, so I'm not going to go into it that much, but they came out and said last week they were playing the Broncos. They played more conservatively than they would have had the Broncos had a quarterback, still put up 31 points. I think the Saints are going to be able to take this one because I think Taysom Hill brings a whole other aspect to the offense that a lot of teams don't know how to deal with as of yet.
Did you know that the Bills and the 49ers is a pick'em? People, run to Vegas and put money on this one. The Bills and the 49ers is a pick'em. That's a gift. The Bills and the 49ers, I'm just going to say it one more time. The Bills and 49ers are a pick'em. Now, I'm looking at the Niners schedule. They have some adorable wins here. They beat the Giants, beat the Jets, beat the Patriots, 33-6. That was cute. Do you really think this game should be a pick'em? What is wrong with people? Take the Bills. That is my lock this week. Now, could Buffalo lose? Yeah, any team could lose any week. But if we're talking about picking a game, the Bills are first place in the AFC East, and the Niners are last in their division. You have to take Buffalo, people. It's a smart pick.
So those are our locks of the week. As I mentioned, in terms of records, 7-5. I've hit 4 locks in a row. Brennan's still top dog, 8-4, and Dan is 7-5 as well. So our locks have been on for the majority this season, and those are our locks for this week. Now it gets interesting with the upsets. We'll go in reverse order here, starting with you, Dan. And Dan and Brennan are in agreement, like Brennan and I were with our locks. I am not. I'm picking the same team they are, just not as my upset pick. But Dan, your upset for NFL Week 13.
Take the Patriots this week over the Chargers. Like I said last week, I got to get a very close look at the Chargers with the Bills. Anthony Lynn, man, how does this guy have a job in the NFL? He is not good at managing the clock. The Chargers could have won last week if they could manage their timeouts against Buffalo, but they couldn't do that. And I know Bill Belichick can do that. Much better coach. I'm going to take the Patriots.
Yeah, I agree. Patriots in this one, I think that they are a team that I don't know. They compete. Bill Belichick is obviously is probably the greatest coach of all time. I think that when he's on the sideline, every team he coaches has a chance. That being said, I know that the Chargers are favorites in this one, but I do think that the Patriots are going to be able to come away with a win. Anthony Lynn, not a good coach. Anytime your coach comes out and says, yeah, we're not really playing for the playoffs this year. I don't know, man, we're just going to give up. When your team is still technically in playoff contention, is a guy that I don't think anyone really wants to play for. So I'm going with that is probably one of the biggest reasons I'm going with the Patriots.
Look, we talked on it early in the show. You can go back when we log this show and view it. But I'm a man of my word. I gave you reasons to why the Jets have a chance and why they need, if they don't want to go 0-16, to beat the Raiders. I'm a man of my word. I am locking in, or upsetting in, however you want to phrase this. My upset of the week is the New York Jets getting their first win of the season against the Las Vegas Raiders. I understand Raiders are 8-point favorites. I understand that. I laid out points why I think the Jets could win. This is bold. I understand it. Will I get made fun of in the open of next week's show or in a text chain at maybe 4:05? Absolutely. Probably, if it doesn't come to light with the Jets getting their first win. But guess what? I have a conviction. As Brennan said earlier in this pick segment, it's in my gut. The Jets have to get at least one win. They're the laughingstock of the NFL no matter what. They need a win. This is the last week. They're going to get it. You look at the remaining schedule, they're not going to have an easy time with those last 4 games. This is it. This is the week the Jets take it. It's bold, but that's just who I am. And especially when the points are so close and maybe I can make a difference this week, I'm picking the Jets as my upset. So take it for what you will in terms of our upset picks. 4-8, I am in the upset. So best record, by the way, which is still very poor. And Brendan and Dan are both 3-9 in their upset picks. We will now run through the rest of the NFL Week 13 slate. Brennan starting with Browns versus Titans.
I'm going to do this game. We already talked about it. Browns versus Titans. So you already know who I picked. Dan and John both picked the Titans. I'm not going to talk about the game at all because I want to fit in a quick MVP of the week because we didn't do that segment.
Yes.
My MVP of the week is Mariah Carey for making $500,000 every year during Christmas time because of plays from her songs and getting royalties. That being said, I'm the only one who picked the Cleveland Browns. Everyone else has the Titans.
I guess we'll just do MVP of the week right now. I looked at the time and I was like, we can't fit it in. Probably should have texted you. My MVP of the week, Trace McSorley. Go watch the interview. Trace McSorley threw a touchdown pass. Dan.
My MVP this week is Errol Spence Jr. He's an actual boxer and someone that you should actually watch if you want to watch boxing. And he won yesterday.
There you go. That pay-per-view real fight, whatever. At AT&T Stadium, and it actually, people in boxing world, yeah, whatever. We'll go back into the NFL picks. There you go. So, for those watching, you got the MVP of the week if you care. Looking back at the slate, Colts-Texans game we didn't talk about. We have Colts across the board. Indy only -3. I think it's just because Houston played well on Thanksgiving Day. I don't think they're going to get the win, and Brennan and Dan don't agree as well. Bengals versus Dolphins. Dolphins surprising 11.5-point favorites. I know it was, it's my Giants, but since these defense is a little better than people think, of course we have Dolphins across the board, but will it be a 12-point victory? That's remained to be seen. Raiders versus Jets, Dan.
Raiders and Jets, you have the Jets, we have the Raiders. Watch Ian Flanagan on The Voice this week. This game is going to be unbelievable. Let's move on, please.
Next up, Vikings versus Jags. Vikings are 10-point favorites. I almost picked the Jags to upset them, but then I figured out the Jags are a very bad team. Every one of us has the Vikings, so the other two must have had the same thought process that I did. John?
Saints, Falcons. Both Brennan and I have Saints as our locks, and Dan has the Saints as well, so agreement across the board. Lions versus Bears, NFC North matchup, Brennan.
It's going to be the Bears. All three of us have, well, two of us have Bears. Dan has the Bears, which is arguably the better choice. But they're only 3-point favorites. I think the Lions really don't have a stable head coach at this point, and I think that is a huge deficit for them. I think the Bears, well, yes, they have lost a lot of games in a row. I think they still have, that 5-0 spirit that they had at the beginning of the year, possibly. I get Mitch Trubisky is starting, but at the same time, I think that the Bears' defense is one of the best in the NFL, and I think that they're going to be able to stop the Lions' offense this week. All three of us, the Bears.
Giants versus Seahawks. Seattle -11. Brendan and Dan obviously went the smart way and went with the Seahawks. I have the Giants, of course. Laid out my points. Colt McCoy, looking at you. Manage game manage. That is what I'm telling you. Rams versus Cardinals.
Rams and Cardinals. All three of us have the Cardinals, although in nature, I think you have to take a Ram, right? I think they're much tougher than a Cardinal. Cardinals, both teams are pretty inconsistent, but one team has Kyler Murray and the other one does not, which is why I took the Cardinals.
Eagles versus Packers. I think I'd take an Eagle in nature in this one, but I'm going to take the Packers in the game. All three of us picking the Packers in this one. They're 8-point favorites. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to prove that he should win the MVP trophy this year in this game.
Next, we have Patriots and Chargers. Chargers favored by 1.5 at home. Bill Belichick greater than Anthony Lynn. That's simple math, folks. The next game, we have the Broncos and the Chiefs. Chiefs favored by 13.5, also at home. The Patrick Mahomes factor is just huge here. Take the Chiefs, people.
Brennan?
Next up is Washington football team versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. All three of us have the Steelers in this one. It makes sense. The Steelers are undefeated. I get it's only a 7-point spread. Probably should have made it my lock. Chose not to for no specific reason. But I think the Steelers are going to be able to improve their record even more, become 12-0. Washington football team, not a good football team.
Monday Night Football, Bills and 49ers. That's a pick 'em, people. What? The game's being played in Arizona. Take the Bills. All three of us have the Buffalo Bills.
Final game of Week 13, Tuesday Night Football on Fox. Cowboys, Ravens. We have Ravens across the board for obvious reasons. And that does it for this December 6th edition of the MVP Show. Luckily, we got the MVPs in the week of our namesake, so there you go. You can look back, and we'll log this video as well if you missed it. Gave you our NFL picks. For Dan Passante and Brennan Miller, I'm John Vicari. Enjoy your Sunday and NFL Week 13.